About 2 years ago, my boyfriend Luke and I were at our friend's house. He lived about a half an hour away from us in a small beachside suburb called Two Rocks. To get there from our house, you have to travel down a road called Wanero Road. It's a very long winding road and has no streetlights. Lining the side of the road are white gum trees. These stretch on for a few kilometers. A lot of people have crashed their cars on this road. Most end up as fatal crashes. There are quite a few crosses, especially in the white gum area. Anyway, it was about 1 in the morning when we decided to head back home, as we were both really tired after a long day. We turned, as usual, onto Wanero Road, and were chatting to each other about what to do the next day, when we reached a high-end death toll area. Luke always slowed down near here, because there's so many windy sharp turns that you have to be careful. As we were driving, I looked out of the window, and to my absolute astonishment, there was an old man walking down the road with a bag in his hand. I pointed this out to Luke, but he just thought it was some weirdo who had one too many to drink. About a minute later, Luke slammed on his brakes and we skidded around, doing a 180-degree turn. We had both just seen the same man, carrying the bag, run out into the road waving his arms. We sat dead silent watching where he had come from, but nothing was there, just the trees and the butte. Not far away from where we had stopped, there was a white cross where an old man had flipped his four-wheel drive and died instantly. On another occasion near the same spot, I saw a young girl, about 17, wearing blue jeans and standing next to a white gum tree. Luke didn't see her, but I can remember that she looked sad, almost lost. There have been a lot of claims from a lot of different people about the white gums on Wanero Road, mainly about figures darting out trying to make their vehicles come off the road, or of an old man walking along carrying a bag. We don't travel down that road anymore. They've built up a new road that's more convenient for us. A few other things have happened to me in the past 18 months. I just bought a new kitten not too long ago, and she is always very alert when she is in my bedroom. Usually, she will cuddle up and purr, or go to sleep, but in my bedroom, she can't settle down. A few weeks after we got her, Luke was working a night shift, and I was home alone in bed, because I'm not fond of being on my own in a dark house. I decided that my kitten would stay with me in my room until Luke got home. At about 11 p.m., I just finished watching a movie on the TV and grabbed the kitten and headed to bed to read a book. I was a few pages in when Lottie, my kitten, started trying to hide underneath my arm. At first I thought she was just getting comfortable, but that's when I noticed she was hiding. She then started to walk up onto me, looking up at the ceiling. Her pupils were huge, and her ears were back, and her tail was wagging angrily. I tried to settle her, but she started to follow something along the roof with her eyes. I looked up, but couldn't see anything, so went back to reading, although I was very uneasy. Lottie kept following this invisible thing for about a half an hour. Then she eventually went to sleep under my blanket. From then on, when I'm alone in my room, I always feel uneasy, like I'm being watched. Okay, this isn't the first supernatural type thing that I think I may have experienced, but it is the only one that I know for sure was real. My best friend moved here to Kentucky when I was in kindergarten from Chicago, and moved next door to me when I was about 10. After that, me and her were always together and always spending the night with each other. Loved her parents to death. That particular night, she had spent the night with me, and it happened to be our other best friend's b-day the next day. Well, maybe about 2 o'clock that day, we went over to her house to ask her dad if we could walk down there, as it was just down the road. Her mom was at work, by the way. I waited outside when the door slammed open and she was screaming, "There's something wrong with my dad." I went in and he just looked like he was sleeping. He had his arms crossed and everything. I'm glad he went peacefully. He was pale, and I touched his arm to wake him up, and he was cold. At that point, I knew he was gone. We ran to my paps, and he came over and called an ambulance. The rest is all just heartache and pain, like that comes with any death. I felt like it was important to tell you all that, because it really is relevant to the rest of the story, or at least, in my opinion, it has some correlation. Okay, now on to the creepiest moments. I was spending the night with that same friend, and I asked where the mouthwash was, and this was probably about 3 or so months later. She said her dad had some in his dresser, so I went into his room. I stood there as she looked, and suddenly, we heard this rhythmic knocking all down the side of her house. It was really fast and complicated. We freaked out and ran to her room. I think he didn't want her going through his stuff. Well, that's all that happened for a very long time. The last experience, her dog is chained up in their fenced-in yard, and it was in heat, and my male dog got in her yard and no one was home, so I rushed over there. They really didn't need any more puppies, and opened her gate to get my dog that somehow got in there. And I heard his voice again, very meanly shout, "Hey," so I freaked out and ran again. The main thing I'm wondering about is that knocking. It's really odd. I think about it sometimes, but I mean it shouldn't bother me anymore, but it does. If you have any ideas as to what this is, please speak up. I live in a small residential neighborhood in western Kentucky. My family has resided in our home for 37 years. We're the first home to ever be built on this property, as the same with several other homes in the area. Since day one upon moving into the house, we have been plagued with numerous experiences that, quite frankly, can't be explained. They are loud banging noises that echo from between the halls, strange odors, ranging from the distinct smell of death to a light scent of lilies and roses. Strange shapes of a blackish-gray smoke clinging to the baseboards. Voices that echo through the entire house, ranging from the intensity of a deafening shriek to the softest of whispers. Shadow people walk the house day and night. Strange bluish-green bars of light extend from room to room. Balls of light that chase each other around the ceiling. Full-body apparitions, plain as you and I. Things disappearing, sometimes returning in different parts of the home, sometimes never reappearing. Cold breaths in your ear, an unmistakable touch that chills you to the bone. Several homes in our neighborhood have also stated similar events. Several of the people that have admitted strange occurrences in their homes have been very religious, God-fearing people, with no reason to lie about their situations. Something is happening here. Upon researching our area, it was discovered that back in the early 1700s, this area was an old Indian burial ground. In the mid-1800s, it was decided to put in a real cemetery. The old graves were destroyed, and the remains were disposed of. A new cemetery was started in its place. However, in the 1960s, it was decided to move the cemetery once again due to flooding issues, and a new subdivision was to be put in its place. Being a contractor for our city, my father was offered a reasonable deal on one of the first homes to be put on the land, an offer too good to turn down. Our house was finished on June 14th, 1972. We moved in on June 21st, 1972. It wasn't until recently that my father told us children that he worked for the crew who removed the graveyard. Some of the graves are so damaged by water erosion that they could not be moved, so they were left, and the homes were built on top of them. Even as recently as 10 years ago, less than 5 miles from my home, a family was putting in a swimming pool. While excavating the backyard, several Indian bones were unearthed. The family sold the home and moved. Mysteriously, when several homeowners started asking for copies of our area's records, the records suddenly vanished without a trace. Here are 2 instances in which I experienced ghostly activity. They're not very long stories, but I think they're very interesting. So here goes. I really don't know if you keep up with your website, but if you do, back in 2004, a couple of buddies and I went to Thompson Creek Trail. We started down the trail. My friend and I were at the front of the group. We had flashlights, and we were flashing them at all the really dark areas of the trail. We had passed an old-looking house to our right at the beginning of the trail. Shortly after, there was a curve in the trail, and in the bend of the curve, there was a tree. It was really dark at the trunk of the tree, so I was kind of scared, and I shined my light on it. The image that had projected from my flashlight was of a very tall man and was standing very close to the tree, and a shadow was cast onto the tree trunk. It is a fact that no one was in front of me. My friend had also seen the huge shadow of a man. I've been to a lot of places on your website, and this was the only one where I'd actually seen something, and it scared the living crap out of me. On to my next paranormal experience. For me, I've always believed in the paranormal, though I've never had any experiences of my own until very recently, including the one I just told you about. I met a new friend at school, and he told me his house had spirits in it. He and his family had all something happen to them, i.e., seeing figures, hearing voices, unusual odors, and poltergeists. They even hired a priest to bless the house, and also a psychic. I never thought I would have something happen to me, but me and my mates were watching a movie in his room, and suddenly out of the corner of my eye, I swore to God that I saw a shadowy figure in his mirror, and when I turned my head, it kind of stepped out of view. I thought this was weird, because usually I can tell my eyes are playing tricks on me, but this time it just seemed different. Another experience I had was when I was on the computer alone, and my friend was downstairs. While I was on the computer, I thought I was hearing many voices, like the background noises you hear in a restaurant. I could hear very faintly. Now, because of these experiences, I don't like being alone in this house. What I want to do next is to actually try to do ghost hunting in this house. So there you have it, my 2 experiences. I hope you thought they were interesting, because they scared and terrified me. I just moved back from Long Beach, California, from Vancouver, Washington. A longtime friend named Alan offered me one of his bedrooms, in which I could stay, until I got back on my feet. That night, I felt something sitting on my chest. I remember being too afraid to open my eyes. Whatever it was, it did not move. Then, I opened them and witnessed a flow of whitish-looking vapor protruding out of my chest. It went up above the bed towards the ceiling in shape of stretched-out rings. It looked similar to smoke from a cigarette. It just hovered over the bed in circles and then began to stretch and exit towards the kitchen, which was next door. I did not dare tell Alan about this experience because he is such a skeptic. I can predict his very words. "Ernie, I don't have any idea what you're talking about. You must have dreamed it. He says there's no such thing as spirits or even a god." The very next morning I told Jim, one of the tenants, what I experienced. I just had to get it out of my system. Will someone please hear me out? He had told me that a man named Ron had been staying in that very room, and that, when he discovered that he had some type of incurable hepatitis, he hung himself from the refrigerator door in the kitchen. That really didn't make any sense to me, but he explained that Ron had somehow did this by tying his belt around his neck and then somehow sliding on the floor. According to Jim, Ron received a letter from UCLA about a month later, stating that he was to come to UCLA immediately because they now had a treatment for his type of hepatitis. If he'd only waited one more month, Jim told me that he believed Ron had tried to inherit my body when I was sleeping, as in, tried to possess me. This incident, however, never happened again. I do recall one time waking up at 1 a.m. in that house and hearing a repetitious sound coming from the garage. I looked out the window because the garage had a window, but it was dark. The next day Al was in the garage and I asked him what he was doing in the garage at 1 a.m. He said, "I wasn't in here. Why do you ask?" I told him what I had heard, a repetitious sound from the night before. Then, something made me focus on a small machine that sat on a shelf. I asked Al what it was. He told me that his previous tenant named Ron used to do laboratory work, and that the machine was for polishing rocks. There was still rocks in it. It had a handle that turned. When I turned it, I heard the same sound that I had heard in the morning. I told Al, but he said he must have been mistaken. No one was in the garage last night. It was locked at night, and only I have a key. I said no more. After my brother had died in his home, my family gave it to me to live in. It was an older mobile home. One day, while on my PC, which faced the same wall that my door was on, in fact, my desk was next to the door. My desk is huge, and a bigger desktop than most kitchen tables are. So sitting at my desk, I could see part of the hallway while reading, typing, or whatever on my PC. One day, I just happened to look up at the door, and there came a figure of a man. I could only see his shadow on the emergency door and wall outside my bedroom. He was either bald or had some very short hair. I just sat there and stared for what seemed like several minutes, waiting for him to either come into my room or say something. It finally turned and seemed to go into the bathroom, which was on the other side of the wall, or went in the wall, towards the kitchen and living room area. They're both open, with no wall dividing them. I was there alone, except for my dog Chewy, who is very large, over 160 pounds. I got up to check it out, because from what I saw as a shadow, it didn't look like anyone I knew. I walked by the bathroom peering in, and he wasn't there, so I kept going. When I got into the kitchen, I saw Chewy on the couch, looking out the window at the kids who had just gotten off of the school bus and were walking home. He would have barked, even if he had known whoever the shadow was. He never made a sound. There was no one there, not even in my son's bedroom. I checked everywhere. If he had gone outside, I would have heard the door open and close. The only time my brother ever had short hair was when he was in the Marines. The only other person who had no hair or short hair was my father before he had died. The chemo and radiation treatments for cancer had done that, and both were dead for about 4 years, both dying about 4 months apart. So far, this has been my only encounter with a shadow person or ghost. I never really knew they could or would show up like this. This past year, my daughter who works in a nursing home was telling me they have seen shadow people there too. They seem to be only showing up in this one hall section. I believe she said it was where the patients who weren't doing so well stayed. One patient even complained about being there in that hall. He said they kept bothering him and wouldn't leave him alone. When they moved him to another hall, he quit complaining. He did eventually die several months later. I did see this happen on Ghost Hunters too, where they saw a man's shadow like a figure on a locker. They've mentioned shadow people a few times on there too. Now, I suppose you're wondering if I were scared. For some odd reason, I wasn't at all. I just wish I knew who it was. I know dogs have a sixth sense too, and I still wonder why my dog didn't seem to know he was there. Chewie had never met my brother or my father. Even if he knew them, he would have barked at being excited someone came to visit. Please like this video. Please share this video right now. Stop whatever you're doing, leave a like, comment right now. Even if you're not subscribed, do it anyway. Even if you don't want to subscribe, do it anyway. Do it frickin' anyway. We're gonna start a ruckus up on this channel because me and you, we're ruckus friends, and that's what we do. We're the Phantom Ruckus Brigade. Whatever that means, I don't understand. But guys, thank you for tuning in. No, but seriously guys, I really appreciate it. It really helps the channel so much if you actually give it a like and subscribe and, comment on the video and let me know what you thought was the best story out of all the stories. Personally, for me, it was the last story, but guys, I don't want to make this too long. I just want you to enjoy and actually take in this immersive experience of ghost stories and enjoy your life. I don't know. Lockdown's over. So guys, hopefully you're taking care of yourself. Hopefully that's something good to come in the future, that, we stay like this for a while and nothing resurfaces. But guys, I gotta go. I'm not making any sense. And I love you so much. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.